Hello YouTube, welcome to a brand new channel that I'd like to call The Broken Past. This is a brand new channel built around the idea of fixing older, broken handheld consoles as well as their related games and accessories. This is actually the first video of the channel, so please excuse any roughness around the edges as I try to work on building great content for a great YouTube audience. To provide a bit of background on myself, I am a software engineer by day. I sit around at a computer all day writing software, and then I come home at night and spend all night writing more software in my free time. I love what I do, and I wouldn't give it up for anything. But because I sit around at a computer for so long, I needed to be able to get away from it for a while. That's where my hobby of repairing, or well, at least attempting to repair anyway, old consoles came about. I love tinkering with electronics, and I love repairing stuff. I started by fixing some older 2DS consoles that I bought for cheap off of eBay a while back. It scratched an itch that I was having for fixing stuff, but it quickly grew into a much bigger hobby of mine. I now have a large collection of handheld consoles in various states of repair. The goal of this channel isn't to provide expert guidance or advice on how to fix older devices. I, by no means, am an expert. But what I am is someone who has a bunch of stuff that needs fixed, as well as someone who enjoys technology and making videos as well. As I fix some of my old consoles, I've thought to myself, why don't you make some videos of this? I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have similarly broken consoles and may be too timid to try to fix it themselves. I know that when I started doing some repairs that I had a hard time finding video walkthroughs on how to fix exactly what I was working on. So I figured it'd be a great opportunity to build a channel that goes into detail on what it takes to fix this stuff. Now, that's not to say I can do any better, but I'd certainly love to try. Hopefully you'll find these videos helpful, and they may give you the confidence to make these repairs yourself. And with that, let's begin our first video. For our first video, we're going to start really basic. Recently, I picked up a bunch of original Pokemon or Japanese pocket monster games off of eBay. They were incredibly cheap. And believe it or not, 3 out of the 5 that I bought had the original game saves still on them from when they were originally made. I believe it might have even been the red one that had over 215 hours of playtime on it from the original battery still. That's crazy. I discovered that one of the games, however, had no game save on it. I booted it up, and sure enough, there's no game on there. I then started it, got to a point where I could save, and saved the game. I then shut off the console, took the cartridge out, put it back in again, booted it back up, and sure enough, the save was gone. In this case, this is a classic case of the battery being dead. These things have a tiny coin cell battery in them that last maybe 15 to 20 years if you're lucky. These things are clearly past the 20-year mark, as these are all from about 1997, so give or take, 21 or 22 years old, which is just crazy that some of them still work. But eventually the battery finally dies, and the storage in these things requires batteries to keep the game safe. And once the battery dies, there goes the game save. So I replaced the battery on it, fixed it up, and life was great. Put it back into the console, started it up, saved the game, verified everything worked great. However, the Pokemon trading card game has been a bit tricky. When I tested it out, I booted it up, and sure enough, there was no game save. So I figured, just like the other one, the battery must be dead. But I went ahead and started the game. I went through the tutorial until I got to the point where I could save the game. I saved it, pulled the cartridge, put it back in, and booted it back up, expecting the save to be gone. However, the game was actually still there. So I was a bit confused, not really sure what was wrong. I went ahead and pulled it again and let it sit overnight. However, after booting it up today, the game save was gone. So the battery was definitely on its way out, but maybe just not quite as dead as the other one was. I can't prove it on here as it takes so long to get to the save point in this game, but I'll just pop in the game here using my original Game Boy Advance SP. Unfortunately, the AGS 001 model, not the 101 backlit model. And this game also has an issue with the cartridge not necessarily always being read. You can see the corrupt Nintendo logo at the bottom, so the contacts might be a little bit dirty. Unfortunately, though, I really don't care too much as it's mainly for display purposes, so I can deal with it really not reading on occasion. But we can see here that if I start the game, after it gets read, there's only a single option for new game. There's no more save game option in here anymore. So with that said, let's crack it open and swap the battery out. The battery swap itself is super easy to do. To start with, you'll need a game bit to open it up. I'm not sure the exact size on this one, but it's the smaller of the two you usually see for sale. The game bit is a bit of a security bit with a rounded head on the screw with notches in it that are grabbed by the bit. I've also heard that you can do it with a ballpoint pin cap. You simply melt it and push it onto the screw to fit to size. But these bits are so cheap, I'd recommend just buying one. The set that I have here, I think I bought as part of a set of a bunch of other tools for about $10. But if you want to go even cheaper, you can simply buy just the bits for probably $3 to $4 if you'd like. And we'll store it off to the side here so we don't lose it. Flip the cartridge over, and the front cover simply slides down and then pops off. At this point, we can see that we have a circuit board complete with the game and the battery. If you look at the battery here, you can see that it says 98-11 on it. This means that it was manufactured in 1998. I believe that the 11 stands for the 11th month, not the 11th week. So, likely November of 1998. This means, now that we're in February of 2019, that we're just over the 20-year mark on it. But this thing is a piece of cake to swap out. We've got two tabs, one there and one there, that we simply need to desolder, pull the battery off, and put a new one on. I actually have a new one right here, which we can actually see is a little bit bigger than the other one, which is actually making me a bit nervous. These are normally a bit smaller, but I think we're okay. This game has a few more bits on it with some LEDs, resistors, etc. on it, so it might be a bit of a tighter squeeze to get it on there, but we'll give it a shot. Now, I forgot to grab my flex pin to help with it, but we'll try it without it. I think that's okay. I think we'll be all right. Let's just move some stuff out of the way here quick. Of course, make sure you have handy-dandy tweezers, as this can get hot. We don't necessarily want to grab the battery with the soldering iron baking right there. We have a bit of solder and our soldering station on the side just out of camera. That's okay, though. We'll start by tinning the soldering iron. Let's zoom in a bit here. We then tin the pads first, as the really old factory solder is much harder to melt, but by putting some fresh solder on there, it makes it much easier to transfer the heat and ultimately melt the solder and pull the battery off. We want to make sure we don't pull too hard, as we don't want to accidentally rip the pads off of the board. We also don't want to burn ourselves in the process. Okay, we've got one side done. We then move to the other side, keeping things in focus. After heating the other side, the battery comes right off. Easy. We then let the board cool down for a minute. Just for kicks, let's check out the voltage on the old battery. We can see that it comes in barely over 2 volts, so it looks like it's ready for a replacement. Alright, let's check this battery out here and see if it can fit. I think it will, but it'll be a tight squeeze. Let's zoom in a little bit here. You can see on the board that there's a plus on one side and a negative on the other side. These match with the positive and negative on the new battery. We want to make sure that we connect them together properly and that it sits in a position just like so. I'm going to try to tin the tabs on this battery to help out with making it easier to install. Of course, without the flux, it's a bit harder to get the solder to wick to the tabs. So it's really not sticking at all, but that's fine. It's going to help a little bit at least. We're going to put the battery into position, which is clearly a bit of a struggle since it's such a tight space. And there's some bumps in the solder we've already put into place. That's making it a bit harder to get in place. But we can do it. We just need to align it carefully. It'll fit. But it'll be a tight fit. It's definitely a struggle getting it into position, though. Okay, now that we're ready, we can attach the battery by melting the solder and connecting the tab to this pad. After doing the first side, we move around to the other side and repeat the process by holding the battery and melting the solder and connecting the tab that way. Whoops. Attaching the second tab popped off the first tab. We'll just use some tweezers to help hold and remelt that side of it back on. And that's it. We're done. It's definitely not the greatest job. You can see a big blob of solder on this one side. I'll blame the lack of flux in doing it in front of the camera for the first time. But that's okay. It'll do what we're wanting to do for this video. So lastly, while we're at it, we'll use a bit of 99% isopropyl alcohol to help clean the board and clean any flux off the solder points we worked on. We just want to make sure that there's no chance for corrosion from the acidity of the flux down the road. Since we used some rosin core solder, we want to clean off any residual flux that remains on the board. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and attack the pins once more to see if that helps with any difficulties in reading the cartridge. Just use a little bit of alcohol and give it a bit of a scrub. I know there's some competing ideas on this, where some say not to use isopropyl alcohol. I've even heard some say to use WD-40, which actually I've done before and had good luck with it. I've also heard of using a pink pencil eraser and just erase with it. Then obviously clean off the eraser when you're done. However, I've actually never tried that method though, but I've heard good things about it. And after that, that's it. So at this point, we simply need to drop the board back into the case. Let's zoom back out a bit here. Then slide the cover plate up. Well, the extra battery is definitely a bit bigger than the old one, so it's a much tighter squeeze to get the cover on. Since the battery doesn't fit perfectly flush like the other, it's a bit tighter. But there it goes. Definitely a tight squeeze, but it does work. In this case, I used a CR2025 battery instead of the original CR1616 battery that came on the board. So in my case, the battery is 20 millimeters in diameter by 2.5 millimeters tall, whereas the old one was 16 millimeters in diameter by 1.6 millimeters tall. So not a huge difference, but just enough to make it much tighter of a squeeze. If I were to do it again though, I definitely would use the 1616 battery. The CR2025 fits just fine in the other games, but they don't have a lot of the additional circuitry, so it was a lot easier in that case. But if all you have is a 2025, it does work. It's just a much tighter fit. Okay, at this point, let's pop it in again and make sure that the game still works at least. So far, so good. We can see the game still works, and we're good to go. As soon as I finish this video, I'll be giving it a test to make sure that the save is working properly. I'm not entirely sure, but I've read a lot of stuff online that says that simply turning the cartridge off and back on is enough to verify if the battery is properly saving the game for us. However, I think there's a possibility that the console itself might provide some power to the cartridge even when the console's off, so that really might not be enough to test if the new battery works properly. I'm not 100% certain, but I would, just to make sure, I would take the cartridge out of the console and give it an hour, a day, 2 days, however long it took before we had the issue before. Give it that much time just to make sure that the game save is still there. And with that being said, we're done. Pretty easy to do overall. I want to say thank you for watching this first video from the Broken Past. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it was helpful. Keep an eye out for future videos soon. I do plan on doing a bunch of stuff in the future. I actually just picked up a huge order of DS lights that had various faults, all sorts of various issues. I also picked up a couple of original DSs. For those, I plan on doing a screen swap on one of them, and another I'll be doing a conversion to a Macro XL. For some of the DS lights, I know I'll be doing a case swap on one of those. And I'll be doing a macro conversion on one or more of the other ones as well. And I might even be doing a screen swap or a digitizer swap. There's a lot of stuff wrong with them, a lot of fun stuff that I can probably do. So there's a lot of content that I could look at putting out for those consoles. So as all the YouTubers say nowadays, if you liked this video, hit that like button, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want more, and please leave a message down below in the comments with what you'd like to see next, and I'll try to make that happen. Thanks so much for watching the first video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you come back soon. Thanks a lot.